In this section, we will be looking at the Pro Channel. Pro Channel comes with a producer version and is Sona's collection of inline console emulation modules for processing such as EQ, compression and tube emulation. If you have the studio version, there's still an inline EQ in the form of the Sonitus EQ, but one of the great advantages of the Pro Channel is that, well as sounding great, its interface is always there, ready to use, so there's no interface windows to manage, as there is with effects in the effects bin. We looked at the Pro Channel briefly in passing a couple of times already, so let's have a more in-depth look now. It's available in the console view as we've seen, and is in the console view strip in its compacted view. We can expand that by clicking the expansion icon. This Open Pro Channel command can also be assigned as a keyboard shortcut. It's also available in all views via the inspector as we've seen. Remember, the inspector keyboard shortcut is Ctrl-I. Notice as soon as we call up the Inspector Pro Channel though, it disappears from the console view. It can't be visible on the same track in both places at once. At the very top of the Pro Channel, there is an area indicating the current preset loaded if there is one. You can see this has a full reset. And presets can be loaded and saved from here using the relevant icon. To the right of that is another button for adding modules. And further right is the global on-off switch. Note that this is a bypass switch and does not change the on-off state of any modules in the Pro Channel. The Pro Channel itself is made up of modules, several of which are included, but there are others available from purchase from Cakewalk as well as other third parties. The only module that can't be removed is the EQ. Others can be inserted, replaced and removed using the right-click menu. The whole PC can either be pre or post effects bin, which is also selected via this menu. Note that on the compacted version of the Pro Channel in the console view, the post button, as well as the global on-off button, are available there. It's pre-effects bin by default. The original Pro Channel modules can only have one instance at a time inserted. These are the EQ, and there's two compressors, the PC76 channel type as you can see here, and also the PC4K S-type bus compressor, as well as the tube emulator. All of the other modules can have as many instances on one track as you want. We insert them by selecting Insert Module. In addition to those that we've already mentioned, the producer version comes with two console emulators, one for the channels and one for buses, but of course either can be used. There's also Reverb 2, which is a reverb, soft tube saturation knob, and an effects chain module. That effectively now means that any VST can be inserted into the PC. We'll be taking an in-depth look at effects chains later. The signal flow through the Pro Channel is from top to bottom, and the modules can be reordered in any order you like. Just click, hold and drag into the position that you want them. If you wish to insert a module in a particular place, just make sure that the one beneath it is highlighted, and then choose the one you want from the insert module. That will be added above it. If the PC is fully loaded with modules, as it is here, and you can't see them all, the modules can be collapsed, which frees up some real estate. Alternatively, it can be scrolled using the mouse wheel. If you don't have a mouse wheel or prefer keyboard shortcuts, the page up and page down keys will also scroll. While we're here, the N key will jump to the very bottom of the Pro Channel, and the Home key will jump to the very top. Remember, for either method to work though, the PC does need to be in focus. All of the controls, including loading presets, are quick groupable, meaning loading a preset or inserting modules on more than one track can be done very quickly. For example, to insert a reverb onto all of the tracks, press Ctrl-A, that selects them all, and then hold down the Control key while choosing to insert that module. If we now look at all of the other Pro Channels, you'll see that a reverb has been inserted. All of the controls work in the same way. I've already mentioned the master reset, and loading this will reset the PC to its default state. This might be helpful if you find that you're getting a little lost with the number of modules that you've added. Click on the Open Preset icon, and you'll find it in the presets. Finally, once you've set a strip up how you want it, you can choose to save this as a default for all tracks. If you're working in the bus view, you can set a different set of modules there as default for buses, and that's simply accessed by right-clicking and selecting Set Modules as default for tracks, or in the bus view, it reads Set Modules as default for buses. The compressors and other modules are all fairly typical in their setup and use, which is beyond the scope of this video, but let's have a closer look at the effects chain module and EQ, which are a little more unique to Sona and will give you an idea on how the Pro Channel functions. At the top, we have the clip indicator. Next to that is the module on-off button, as well as the module collapse icon. These are common to all modules. If at any time the Pro channel starts to overload, which is indicated by the clip indicator turning red on the module, the gain level can be controlled by either reducing the gain control on the channel strip or the preceding module if there is one. I'm only going to be briefly touching on effects chains here, as I'll be covering those in detail later. As well as adding the effects chain module empty, it's possible to drag a chain straight to the PC from the browser, which automatically inserts the effects chain. Note that it's one of the older original effects chains you'll need to assign the controls. So let's call the browser into view, navigate to the chains, and then drag one in. Let's hide the browser again. As you see, the newer effects chains already have their interfaces set up. As said, I'll be looking at effects chains in more detail later, but for now on the PC module, there are two tabs. One for the controls interface, which is the one we're looking at now, and one to show the effects. If you have the empty module, loading a preset there is done by right-clicking anywhere on the module. Effects can be added from this menu as well to build your own chains. Again, we'll be looking at that later. Now let's look at the Pro Channel EQ. This is a quad curve equalizer module, meaning there are 4 different modes that will result in 4 different curves from the same settings depending on mode. The EQ is unique in the Pro Channel modules in that it can be displayed in compact mode, which will hide most of the controls while still showing the plot. This can be helpful if the Pro Channel's too tall with everything shown and you need a little bit more real estate. The EQ can still be controlled in compact mode using the plot, as we'll see shortly. To change to compact mode, we either select it from the Inspector's display mode, which is accessed at the bottom of the inspector if using that view. If not, it's done from the options within the console view. Under the Pro Channel, select Compact EQ module. You can see that's now much smaller. It's also possible to change the EQ plot resolution from here. And by default it's on auto, meaning it will change dynamically, but that can be changed here. This also responds to quick grouping, so changing all or selected tracks at once is possible. I'm just going to hold the control key down and change that to plot resolution of 18 decibels, which changes them all. It's a 6-band EQ consisting of variable frequency high and low pass filters, with variable cut-off slopes as well. And it's also 4 peak or bell bands, the low and high of which can be changed independently into shelf-type filters by selecting the relevant switches. The 4 centre bands are colour-coded, red is low, yellow's for the low mids, green the higher mids, and blue the high band. All 6 bands can operate from 20Hz to 20 kHz, changed using the frequency control. 4 peak filters can be turned on and off using the buttons just underneath the EQ plot, as can the low and high pass filters using their buttons. The 4 bell bands have adjustable Q and up to 18 decibels of cut or boost. And as controls are changed, that's reflected in the EQ plot above. The bands are also colour-coded in the plot, and the resulting curves are drawn in a relevant colour. The bold white line indicates the EQ curve for the overall effect of all bands of the audio. The 4 modes are chosen from above the EQ plot, and this is what gives the EQ its different characteristics. Pure is a transparent type that doesn't impart any character or colour on the sound and produces a soft and gentle curve. E-type mimics a vintage hardware unit with a constant Q, and this allows a narrow Q at low gain, which makes the curve quite clinical. That can be useful on drums, for example. G-type mimics a modern hardware unit with dynamic Q. This makes for a more gentle Q curve, which is more subtle and musical than the E-type. To the far left is a hybrid, which is a combination of the E and G types. The curve is a gentle curve when boosting, but more clinical when cutting frequency. When changing any of the controls within Sonar, holding down the Shift key allows for fine control. And if you need to enter exact figures, double-clicking in any of the text fields allows you to enter that there. It's also possible to adjust the 4 peak filters of the EQ by dragging the coloured nodes in the plot display. These nodes will appear when you put the cursor over the plot. You can turn each filter on or off by clicking on the relative node. If the node isn't visible while turned off, make sure that the gain for that filter isn't set at such a setting that it's out of range of the plot's resolution. Dragging a node left or right changes the frequency, and up or down changes the gain. Alt-clicking up or down changes the Q. The Q can also be changed by right-click and dragging. It's also possible to copy EQ settings from one track to another. To do this, control-click on the compact mode EQ plot and then hold and drag to the target track's EQ plot. Once there, release the mouse. This copies the settings across. And that completes our tour of the Pro Channel. Now let's look at how to set up a sidechain control compressor. The first thing to establish is what we want to achieve, and in this example, I want to lower or duck the level of the bass guitar slightly every time a kick drum hit happens. This is what the term ducking means. The first thing I need to do is switch to the bass guitar track and insert a compressor with a sidechain input. Of the standard PC compressors, this is the PC4K bus type that we've just looked at. The Sonitus compressor has a sidechain facility, as do many other VST types if you don't have the producer version. So the Pro channel, as you can see, is open on the bass guitar track, and the PC4K compressor is already inserted. Now I'm going to switch it on. At this stage I'm going to play back the soloed bass track and set the amount of compression needed to achieve the gain reduction we want to see when a kick drum hit takes place. Remember, this is more extreme than we'd normally apply to a track. Don't turn on the sidechain at this stage. And also remember that we don't want make-up gain, or else the volume reduction we want to happen when the compressor is reducing the gain will be made up at the output stage, completely ruining the object of the exercise. Once we have the compressor set up the way we want it, we can now turn on the sidechain. Now we play back the soloed bass again, and you'll see the compressor appears to have stopped working. This is because the compressor is now responding to the signal received on its sidechain input, and as yet we haven't assigned it one. This leads us to the next stage. We now switch to the kick drum to assign an out. What we don't do is assign the kick drum's output to the sidechain though. If we do that, it will activate the compressor as we want, but we won't actually hear the kick drum at all because the output to the sidechain input doesn't go anywhere from there. This is where a send comes in useful. We insert a send from the kick drum track to the bass track's compressor input, which shows as an output port in the drop-down. Track compressor input to bass rock rhythm. How much signal is sent is controlled via the send level control, and I'd suggest for ducking a track this is left at unity. Whether the send is pre or post will depend on the effect you want. Remember, if it's pre-fader, the amount of ducking of the bass guitar signal will remain constant and high regardless of where the kick drum fader is. If it's post-fader, the gain reduction applied to the bass will be lower as the kick drum level is lowered. This is probably a more natural, less noticeable effect, but experiment and see what works best for you. Now let's solo the kick drum, play back the project. We can fine-tune the compressor on the bass track. That's how you set up a sidechain.